There were pool noodles in my tomato patch, a flamingo float tangled in my tractor wheel, and Karen was standing knee-deep in my pond, clinking a champagne glass like she just bought the place. I had been gone less than 12 hours, a quick overnight trip to deliver feed to my cousin's horse ranch in Oakville, and I returned to find a full-blown Ahoy pool party raging on my private land. Not near it, not beside it, but right in the heart of my property, on the edge of my pond, where my dogs usually drink, my chickens dust bathe, and where I fish in peace when I want to escape the noise of town. Now there was a rented DJ booth blaring dance music, strangers doing cannonballs into the shallows, lawn chairs, beach umbrellas, disposable plates flapping in the breeze, and an inflatable unicorn being ridden by a man in a Speedo who waved at me like I was the guest. And right at the center of it all, Karen, queen of the HOA, wearing a wide-brimmed hat, oversized sunglasses, and that smug little grin she always wore whenever she thought she had won. I pulled up at my truck, stunned. I didn't even get the door closed before she spotted me. "Oh, hey there, neighbor," she chirped, as if she hadn't turned my peaceful land into a budget water park. "Hope you don't mind. We figured the weather was too good to waste, and the pond just looked so inviting." I stepped forward, trying to keep my voice calm. "Karen, this is my land. This pond isn't part of the HOA. What the hell are you doing out here with all these people?" She chuckled, that same rehearsed, fake laugh she used at board meetings when she shut down other members' suggestions. "Oh, come on now. Don't be a party pooper. This is a community celebration, and technically, according to this old map we found, the pond is within a shared easement. It's common space now." I stared at the folded paper she handed me. It was a printout from Google Earth with a highlighter line drawn around the area. No signatures, no legal survey stamp, not even a date. "Karen," I said slowly, "this is not a legal document. This pond's been on my land since before your HOA even existed. I've got the deed, the survey, and every legal line that says so." "Oh, lighten up," she huffed, turning away. "It's just water. It's not like we're doing anything harmful." At that exact moment, a kid cannonballed into the water, nearly crashing into one of the koi I'd raised from fingerlings. A dog I didn't recognize was digging into the mulch around my greenhouse. Someone had parked an SUV right on my vegetable bed. I wasn't sure whether to scream, call the cops, or start tossing lawn chairs into the compost bin. I turned and walked back toward the truck. My blood was boiling. I wasn't going to throw punches or start a scene in front of a dozen strangers, but I wasn't letting this slide either. Later that evening, once the music had died down and the freeloaders had packed up their coolers and left their trash scattered across my property, I walked the entire perimeter. Beer bottles floated among lily pads. Pizza boxes were jammed into the split rail fence. Someone had used the base of my shed as a changing area, judging by the wet towels and suspicious swimwear abandoned behind it. I snapped photos of everything, every tire rut, every plastic cup, and broken sandal. Then I went inside and started calling every authority I could think of: sheriff, zoning office, county clerk. Most of them were polite but useless. No one had seen a permit, no one had granted permission, and no one had the teeth to stop a bunch of HOA members who believed they had a right to access. By the next morning, things had gotten even worse. Karen had installed a laminated sign next to the pond on a cheap metal stake. It read, "Community Pool, property of Whispering Pines FOA. Swim at your own risk." My jaw almost hit the ground. Not only was she doubling down, she was turning this into an official HOA fixture. It was like watching someone walk into your kitchen, slap their name on your fridge, and declare it a public food pantry. And she wasn't done. That week, the Whispering Pines newsletter came out with a full-color photo spread titled Splish Splash Summer Bash. It included shots of people lounging in my Adirondack chairs, children diving off the old tree stump that shaded the north end of the pond, and Karen herself doing a toast with a quote bubble that read, "Our pond brings the community together. Our pond." I was fuming, but I didn't shout. I didn't throw a fit. I didn't argue with Karen's latest barrage of condescending texts reminding me to embrace community values. I had something better. Because the truth was, I knew how to handle trespassers who thought they owned the place, and I also happened to know a guy named Jackson who ran a pig farm just a couple miles down the road. The kind of pigs that loved water, hated strangers, and didn't care where they pooped. If Karen wanted to treat my land like a public pool, well, she was about to learn what kind of guests came with the territory. And this time, I wouldn't be calling the cops. I'd be bringing backup with curly tails and an appetite for chaos. The sun was just rising when I found the first hoofprint near the pond's edge. It was barely a crescent in the mud, but it meant more to me than any apology ever could. I had spent the better part of the morning prepping, dragging long extension cords from the barn, installing a trail camera to catch any more unauthorized swims, and laying out my plan like a farmer playing chess. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was strategic. Karen had claimed my land without asking. She had posted signs, hosted a party, and acted like I was the one trespassing on my own property. Now she was going to learn what it really meant to invade a farmer's land and disrespect his boundaries. I stopped by Jackson's pig farm later that day. He was halfway through hosing down one of the larger sties, sweat running down his temples as he grinned at me over the water mist. "You hear about that favor I owe you?" he asked without missing a beat. He always had a sixth sense about things like this, like he could smell mischief coming the way his pigs smelled apples from across a field. "You still got those 5 hogs that went wild last summer?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "Oh, I got 'em," he said, turning off the hose. "Big girls, mean as thunder, love the water too. You got a pond for 'em." "I got the perfect one," I said, watching the hog shake off water like a muddy dog. "Only problem is, it's currently occupied by a bunch of HOA swimsuit models who think my property is their community spa." Jackson laughed so hard he bent over. "You're serious? Karen and her HOA friends again. I thought you already shut them down last year when she tried to hold a bake sale on your driveway." "That was just warm-up. Now she's holding full-blown pool parties. Brought a DJ. Last time I counted 3 kids using my shed as a changing room." "Well," he said, smacking the pig's rump affectionately, "sounds like it's time for a little bacon-powered justice." We spent the next couple days preparing. Jackson agreed to bring the pigs early Saturday morning, the same day Karen had posted in the neighborhood group about round 2, Whispering Pines Summer Splash. Her announcement was as smug as ever, filled with phrases like beloved tradition and open to all community residents. She even asked people to bring extra snacks and pool toys, adding, "Don't worry, the owner hasn't objected since last time." I didn't comment. I didn't correct her. Let her think I had backed down. Let her feel just safe enough to let her guard drop. On Friday night, I went out to the pond and laid a trail of dried corn and melon slices from the barn to the edge of the water. I knew pigs didn't need much convincing, but a little guidance would make their grand entrance more cinematic. I moved the lawn chairs she'd left behind into a tighter cluster, creating a little relaxation zone right at the shallows. Then I adjusted the trail cam, cleaned the lens, and turned it toward what would soon become the stage for the greatest HOA meltdown in the history of the county. Saturday morning arrived hot and humid. By 9:30, I could already hear the faint thump of bass speakers being set up. Cars started rolling in one by one, parking along the edge of the woods where my no parking signs used to be before Karen removed them. She had printed new event signs and zip-tied them to a couple of trees, reading Whispering Pines Pool Party, Don't Block the Drive. It was like watching a fantasy world built on delusion. One Karen thought she could force into reality just by acting confident enough. By 10:30, the party was in full swing. Music blasted, kids shrieked, coolers popped open. A couple of teens were throwing a football across the pond, and someone had set up a grill on my patch of clover. I stayed hidden in the tree line, watching from a distance with binoculars, waiting for Jackson. At exactly 10:45, the familiar rattle of his trailer came rolling down the gravel path. It wasn't subtle. The pigs inside were already restless, snorting and grunting, jostling against the metal bars like they knew something fun was about to happen. I waved him to the side entrance near the north gate, the one Karen always forgot about because it wasn't as pretty for her Instagram posts. "You sure you want all 5?" Jackson asked, climbing down from the cab. "Every last one of them." He chuckled, unlatched the gate, and gave them a holler. "Go on, girls, time to swim." They didn't eat more than that. The biggest, Rosie, if I remembered right, barreled down the dirt like a runaway shopping cart, hooves churning, ears flopping. The others followed like soldiers charging into battle, snorting as they went. The corn trail worked beautifully. They beelined straight toward the water. The first scream was sharp, confused. Then came another, louder. "Is that a pig?" Someone shouted. "Oh my God, they're coming in." The pigs didn't hesitate. They stomped straight into the pond, rolling in the water, grunting and splashing. One bumped into the unicorn float, flipping the man off it like a rag doll. Another climbed halfway onto a folding table and sent it crashing into the water. Guests scrambled. A woman dropped her wine cooler and sprinted away as a pig trotted by with her beach bag swinging from its mouth. Karen came running, screeching, her sun hat flopping with every step. "Whose animals are these? This is a health hazard. They're going to ruin everything." She caught sight of me walking calmly out of the tree line with my arms folded and my phone already filming. "Morning, Karen," I said cheerfully. "Looks like they found the community pool." She turned purple. "You did this. You can't just release livestock. You're going to be reported." I raised an eyebrow. "You mean to the same authorities who confirmed this land is privately owned and not part of your OA's jurisdiction? Or maybe to animal control, who already cleared these pigs last time they wandered onto your lawn?" Her mouth opened and closed like a fish, words failing her as, behind her, one pig plopped a particularly squishy surprise right into a beach shoe. I turned away, grinning as I walked back to the barn. The first half of the plan had gone off perfectly, but the best part, I hadn't even posted the footage yet. That would come later, right after editing in Karen's full meltdown and adding oinking sound effects for dramatic flair. Karen's meltdown didn't just stop at screaming in front of her horrified guests, while pigs belly flopped into the pond like hairy cannonballs. It escalated into something far more spectacular, something that would, within 24 hours, turn her into a neighborhood legend for all the wrong reasons. She chased after one of the pigs with a pool skimmer in her hand like she was fencing at the Olympics, her wide sun hat slipping over one eye as she screamed about sanitation and health violations. One pig bumped into the grill and sent the hot dogs flying. Another climbed into a shallow baby pool someone had brought for the kids and settled down like it owned the place. By then, guests were running, slipping, shrieking, abandoning pool toys and picnic baskets alike. One man left behind his flip-flops and car keys. A woman tried to scoop her toddler up while stepping into something unpleasant left behind by Rosie, the biggest hog of the bunch. I watched it all from the hill with my phone out, calmly documenting the chaos. I wasn't shouting. I wasn't gloating. I just let the camera roll. This was better than anything I could have said or done. Real revenge didn't need commentary. It just needed Karen to be herself, with a little help from 5 strategically timed pigs. As I filmed, someone else beat me to the punch and live streamed the whole thing on a neighborhood Facebook group. I didn't find out until an hour later, when my phone started buzzing with messages from people I hadn't talked to in years. A former neighbor in Florida texted me, "Is this the Karen you told me about, bro? She's going viral." Another sent a screenshot from a Reddit thread called Hellboy Drama Hall of Fame, where someone had already clipped together a highlight reel featuring Karen shrieking as Rosie splashed mud onto a woman in a designer swimsuit. By that evening, it was everywhere. The video had been reposted on multiple platforms with titles like "When Pigs Crash Your Hallway Party" and "Karen's Pool Party Turns into Hogwash." One version had auto-tuned her screaming into a bizarre remix that, honestly, slapped harder than I expected. Karen, of course, wasn't laughing. She sent out an emergency email to all HOA members that night, accusing me of terrorizing a peaceful event and demanding I remove the pigs immediately and issue a formal apology. She claimed I had committed intentional sabotage and threatened legal action, but the real kicker? She tried to find me. The HOA board issued an unauthorized livestock disturbance fee of $1,200, citing disruption of community harmony and property defamation. It was so ridiculous I actually laughed out loud when I read it. I wasn't even part of the HOA. My land had never been inside their jurisdiction, something I'd made sure of when I first bought the property years ago. But Karen had always acted like the whole neighborhood was under her domain, and now she was trying to use that fantasy as a weapon. I didn't respond to her email. I didn't call. I went straight to the county office the next morning and requested an official copy of the land survey. The clerk, a sharp old guy named Marvin, remembered me from when I built my barn. He pulled out the document and gave a low whistle when I told him what was going on. "They're trying to claim your pond." "That's bold. That's real bold." He highlighted the pond, clearly marked within my boundary lines, and handed me a certified copy along with a digital version for easy sharing. With that in hand, I sent a single email to the entire HOA board, attaching the survey, and wrote only one sentence. "Please reference the attached official county document confirming this pond and surrounding land is not and has never been part of Whispering Pines OA. I CC the county attorney, the sheriff's office, and the zoning department, just for good measure." I didn't wait for their reply. I knew exactly what would happen next. 2 days later, a white SUV with government plates rolled up while I was watering the cucumbers. A county surveyor stepped out with a clipboard and a camera. "Got a request for property reassessment," he said. "Someone's trying to dispute boundaries on file." I pointed him toward the pond, handed him the same documents I emailed, and watched as he measured, walked the perimeter, and took photos of Karen's sign that still read "Community Pool." When he was done, he shook my hand and said, "This will get cleared up quick." That night, Karen posted another message in the HOA chat saying she was taking a temporary leave of absence from the board due to harassment and online bullying. Half the comments under her post were sarcastic GIFs or people joking about bringing pigs to the next HOA barbecue. Someone even suggested naming the pond Rosie's Retreat in honor of the main hog. I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. The entire neighborhood had turned on her, not because of me, but because she had pushed too far. People could forgive an occasional overreach, but hijacking private land, lying about it, throwing unauthorized events, and then flipping out on camera, that was something nobody forgot. I spent the next morning cleaning the mess they'd left behind. Again, beer cans, shattered glass, melted marshmallows stuck to my porch railing. But this time, I didn't feel angry. I felt victorious. I had turned the tables without breaking a single law. No yelling, no threats, just pigs, timing, and patience. When I hosed down the muddy patches by the pond, the pigs wandered off to their trailer with Jackson, full and happy, none the wiser about their accidental fame. He promised to bring Rosie back next time Karen got any funny ideas. Before he left, I nailed a large wooden board to a post beside the pond. I painted 3 words across it in thick red letters: Private, note public. Below it, I bolted a laminated photo of the pig party chaos: Karen mid-shriek, floaties flying, pigs splashing in the background. It was better than any lawsuit. It was permanent, and just for good measure, I hooked up a motion-triggered speaker beneath it that oinked loudly whenever someone walked by. It echoed through the trees with a weird mix of comedy and warning, a sound Karen would never unhear. But something told me she wasn't done. Not yet. Not someone like Karen. People like her didn't go down quietly. They plotted, they schemed, and they waited for the next opportunity to strike back. What she didn't know was I'd already planned my next move, because this wasn't just a petty squabble anymore. This was war, and in a war like this, you either outsmart the HOA or you get steamrolled by their delusion. And I wasn't about to let that happen on my land. Ever again. The next week felt like the calm after a storm, but I knew better than to let my guard down. Karen had gone quiet, which for someone like her wasn't a retreat. It was a reload. She wasn't the kind to give up just because the internet turned her meltdown into a meme. No, Karen was the type to dig her heels in and find another way to claw back control, even if it meant rewriting reality to fit her version of events. So when a crisp white envelope showed up taped to my gate with a shiny Whispering Pines Evoe sticker on the seal, I didn't even flinch. I opened it slowly, calmly, as if I was peeling the lid off a can of worms I'd already smelled coming. Inside was a notice of violation. According to this completely imaginary document, I had disrupted a sanctioned community event, endangered children, and released aggressive livestock on communal grounds. They were giving me 30 days to remedy the disruption or face escalating fines. I stood there for a moment, just staring at the paper, not angry anymore, but almost impressed. Karen had gone from claiming my land was part of the HOA to fining me for disrupting an event she never had permission to host on land that didn't belong to her. It was delusional, but it was so on brand I almost laughed. Instead, I walked into my workshop and pulled out the county's stamped land survey again. I took a fresh copy and drove straight to the county records office, where I requested the property lines be reaffirmed and any signage claiming HOA jurisdiction be formally documented as false. Marvin, the clerk, recognized me the second I walked in and said, "Let me guess, Karen again." I just nodded, and he sighed like a man who'd seen one too many disputes over imaginary fences and self-appointed authority. That same afternoon, a truck pulled up on Karen's side of the property line. Out stepped a county surveyor and a zoning official. They didn't knock on her door. They just walked the line, marked the coordinates with fluorescent flags, and took photos of the community pool signs still staked into my land. I watched from the porch, sipping lemonade, as Karen came out in her robe and slippers, flapping her arms and yelling at them from a distance. She kept pointing toward my property, arguing about maps and community bylaws, but they weren't listening. One of them held up the certified documents, pointed to her sign, and shook his head. Then they gave her a warning, not a suggestion, not a friendly reminder, but a formal warning that she was misrepresenting land ownership and could be held liable for any future trespassing incidents. The next day, Karen took the sign down, not with grace, of course, but with a lot of stomping, muttering, and tossing it into the back of her SUV like it had betrayed her. I thought maybe, just maybe, that would be the end of it, but Karen wasn't finished. She was just changing tactics. I got another envelope a few days later, this one from a lawyer, or at least someone pretending to be one. The letterhead looked fancy, but the grammar was terrible, and it was signed with only a first name. It accused me of harassment, property damage, and emotional vandalism, which might be the most HOA phrase I've ever read. I checked the State Bar Association website, and of course, the name didn't show up. It was a scare tactic, cheap and obvious. I didn't respond. I just added it to the folder I was now keeping labeled Karen Incidents, which was starting to resemble a small claims case file. What I did do was take things up a notch of my own. I hired a local carpenter to build a new fence, not just a regular one, but a tall, thick wooden wall along the stretch of property facing Karen's side. On the outside, I had him mount 3 wooden boards, each painted with a different warning. The first read, "Private property." The second said, "Trespassers will be prosecuted." And the third, right in the middle, featured a high-resolution photo of Karen mid-scream, water flying, pigs splashing behind her, laminated and sealed like a trophy. Beneath it, in bold paint, I added a caption, "Pubilates Pul DNIE." It wasn't just a fence. It was a message. A permanent reminder that she picked the wrong battle with the wrong neighbor. When the wall went up, the reactions were immediate. Cars slowed down to take pictures. Some neighbors came by just to shake my hand. Others dropped off homemade cookies and quietly shared their own Karen horror stories. One older gentleman told me she'd once fined him for using red mulch instead of brown. Another said she complained to the board because his wind chimes were emotionally aggressive. The more they talked, the more it became clear that this wasn't just about my pond or her party. It was about years of unchecked entitlement finally hitting a wall. Literally. That weekend, the HOA called an emergency meeting. Karen didn't show up. Word got around that she was laying low and dealing with stress. But the board members who did attend had a very different tone than before. They voted to remove all references to the pond from their community documents. They issued an apology to the neighborhood for recent confusion and overreach. And they replaced Karen's position as head of events with a quiet, kind lady named Eleanor who promptly announced, "No more off-site activities." Still, I wasn't quite done. One last piece needed to fall into place. I called a few of the neighbors who'd been most affected by Karen's antics, people who'd been fined for things like leaving trash bins out a day too long or putting up a birdhouse without HOA approval. Together, we gathered enough signatures to call for a special vote to remove Karen from the HOA board entirely. We didn't have to campaign hard. The pig video had done most of the work. The vote passed in a landslide, and Karen was officially out. That evening, I sat on my porch with a fresh glass of iced tea, watching the sun dip behind the trees. The pigs were back at Jackson's farm. The pond was quiet again, and the wall stood firm at the edge of my land, glowing orange in the sunset. I thought of everything that had happened, the absurdity, the conflict, the chaos, and I couldn't help but smile. Not because I'd won, but because I had finally taught Karen something no HOA rule book ever could. Respect has to be earned, and if you treat your neighbors like obstacles, don't be surprised when the pigs show up. The final nail in the coffin came quietly, like most real victories do. No parade, no headline, just a folded slip of paper pushed into my mailbox with a simple sentence that said Karen had resigned from the Whispering Pines LOA altogether. No explanation, no apology, just her signature beneath a typed statement of withdrawal. I read it twice, then once more for good measure, before setting it down on my porch table like a fragile relic from a long and absurd war. It wasn't just a win for me. It was a sigh of relief for every neighbor who'd ever been cited for grass growing half an inch too tall or for hanging laundry out to dry on a Tuesday. The storm that had loomed over the neighborhood for years had finally drifted off, not with thunder, but with the quiet shuffle of a woman too embarrassed to keep pretending she was in charge. But I wasn't gloating. I didn't blast music. I didn't send out a community-wide "I told you so." Instead, I spent the next few days doing what I'd wanted to do from the start, getting my land back to normal. The pond, after 2 weekends of hog chaos and unauthorized pool parties, needed a proper cleanse. I drained a portion of the water, cleaned the banks, fished out every beer, can, and half-sunk pool noodle, and refilled it slowly with fresh water from the well pump. It was work, but it was peaceful work. Nobody watching, nobody shouting, no one trying to hang fake signs or declare the space community shared. Just frogs returning to their lily pads and dragonflies dancing over the surface again. That Saturday, I hosted a small gathering. No DEA, no newsletter invitation, no RSVP form sent through a homeowner's chain email. Just a dozen or so neighbors who'd stood by me throughout the whole ordeal. People who dropped off tools, shared coffee, or simply gave me a knowing look when they passed by. Jackson came by too, hauling a cooler of smoked pork and laughing every time someone mentioned Rosie's Cannonball. We grilled burgers under the old oak tree, and for the first time in a long while, the only music was the hum of conversation and the gentle splash of kids throwing pebbles into the pond. Invited kids, this time, who actually asked before they set foot on the dock. One of the deputies who dealt with the HOA complaints showed up off duty. He leaned against the fence, sipping lemonade and chuckling as he told me about a county meeting where my story had already become an unofficial training case for dealing with overreaching HOA boards. "They're calling it the Pig Pond Incident," he said with a grin. "You've basically become a legend, whether you like it or not." I just shook my head, smiling, and told him the legend could stay small as long as my property stayed mine. Later in the evening, I walked down to the edge of the pond and looked out at the smooth, quiet water. I could still see the spots where the chaos had happened, the crushed reeds, the muddy footprints, but now they were fading, slowly reclaimed by nature and time, and in a way that felt right. Scars don't need to vanish to mean you've healed. Sometimes they just become reminders of where you drew the line and said enough. Still, I couldn't resist one final touch. Just before sunset, I walked to the far end of the pond where the pigs had made their most dramatic splash, and I hammered a fresh wooden sign into the ground. It was smaller than the first, just waist-high, hand-painted with calm black letters. It read, Rosie's Retreat, Private Pond, access by invitation only. I didn't add any warnings, no threats, no legal jargon. Just a little piece of quiet sarcasm with enough charm that it made everyone laugh when they saw it. That evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the water gold, I sat on the porch with my boots kicked off and a dog curled at my feet. A few fireflies blinked to life near the grass line, and I could hear faint laughter coming from the last few guests lingering by the grill. It was the kind of peace that doesn't come easy when you've got a Karen on the loose. But now it was mine again. Of course, I knew deep down that Karen wouldn't vanish forever. She was still in the neighborhood, still had her little circle of loyal busybodies, but the power was gone. The illusion that she could control, intimidate, or claim what wasn't hers had shattered, and no HOA title or fake permit could put it back together. She'd been exposed in front of her entire kingdom, and no matter how many times she smiled at the store or tried to move past the drama, people would remember the pigs. They'd remember the shrieking, the splashes, the laminated sign on the wall, and the unforgettable sound of oinks echoing across the tree line. A week later, I passed by her house during a morning walk and noticed the curtain shift just slightly. She was still watching, still trying to read the field like it was hers to monitor. I gave a polite wave. She didn't return it. I didn't mind. The truth was, this whole mess had reminded me of something important. Land isn't just about boundaries drawn in dirt. It's about peace, respect, and the right to decide how you share what you've built. I wasn't against neighbors. I wasn't against community. But I was against anyone thinking they could rewrite the rules of ownership with a smile and a fake sign. That pond will probably outlast both of us, long after Karen and I are gone, after the houses are remodeled and the fence boards rot into the ground. That water will still be there. And maybe someday, someone will wonder why it's called Rosie's Retreat, why there's a pig silhouette carved into the fence post, and why there's a laminated photo in the local hardware store showing a sun hat-wearing woman running from a pig like she's in a cartoon. And maybe someone will smile, not because they know all the details, but because they know enough to appreciate a good boundary and a better story. That's the kind of legacy I can live with.